Now, the nation's unemployment rate has risen by 0.8% to 32.9% in the first quarter of 2024. That's from a rate of 32.1% in 2023's fourth quarter. The highest losses were recorded in the community and social services sectors. RMB Economist Siobhan Redford joins us now to paint a clearer picture of the numbers. Thank you so much for your time, Siobhan. Can we really even be surprised, Siobhan, with the current macroeconomic environment and climate and growth that we're under at this point?
We can always be hopeful. I'm not so sure we can be surprised. Yeah, unfortunately, it is a difficult environment. And even though I think things are looking better, this is not an outcome that should be much of a surprise.
Yeah, and actually also really one of the things that stood out for me is that unemployment increased across all the provinces, so meaning that there isn't a pocket in the country where you can actually say this is doing better than the other. And I'm actually wondering, I mean, you say that things seem better, but at the same time, things have gotten worse in some ways. For example, the retrenchments that we are seeing in one of the biggest labor-intensive industries, mining. And I'm just wondering if at this point, if there are any signals of what we can expect in the second quarter, considering the fact that there have been these retrenchments, but also at the same time, load shedding has gotten better.
Well, that is exactly the situation that we find ourselves in. Firstly, it's very important to remember this is kind of unemployment for the first quarter of the year.
Yeah.
So it's already come and passed. And, you know, during that time when you know, we still had quite a bit of load shedding, albeit still looking better relative to a year ago. And, you know, we still have high interest rates and we still have concerns around inflation and very volatile fuel prices. And so I think demand in the local economy is weak, and that then transmits to the rest of the economy. And obviously abroad, that's also not this, you know, overly strong, and that affects us as well.
Yeah.
That said, as you say, when we look forward to the second quarter, I mean, we've you know, up until now, and, you know, won't say anything further than that.
Yeah.
We have had no load shedding for the whole of the second quarter thus far. But yes, as you say, we have a sector, particularly the mining sector, where a number of our commodities are seeing quite weak prices. You know, these things do change, and you can expect a bit of a turnaround, but you know, it doesn't make it easy now, and it does require then that your mining houses have to look at their, you know, sustainability, and you know, and that will look at their employment. So while in one side we might see, say, manufacturing doing better in the second quarter, interestingly, the mining, which actually saw a growth in employment during the first quarter relative to the fourth quarter, is probably going to go down. But we could perhaps see some positivity in other sectors which, you know, up until now have been negatively affected by, for example, load shedding. But also you will continue to see some pressure on your services side, and anything that is quite interest rate sensitive, given that the interest rate environment remains high and is expected to remain so for a while.
Yeah, and really just, you know, I also wanted to pick your brain on, you know, some of the things that you have noted in terms of the industries that have been under pressure. And something that I noticed even with employment, we did have formal employment there increasing by more than 50,000, but the informal sector, actually employment there decreasing by 100,000 people. And I'm just wondering, is there anything to note there in terms of the pressure that we did see in the specific sectors this quarter or last quarter?
So, I mean, I think it's worth noting that construction remains in negative territory in terms of employment compared to the previous quarter. And so that, you know, is where there is definitely pressure. And again, it's an interesting sector where I think you do find some pockets, particularly relating to some infrastructure, perhaps, you know, the build of renewable energy type setups, either through the IPP program or for some companies, is going to help with continued demand. But when we look at, kind of vacant office space and such like that remains quite high, and so there's not major demand, say, to be building big offices, and with interest rates being high again, housing is going to remain under pressure. So construction is unsurprisingly a bit weak. However, we also do find that your utilities is seeing quite weak employment, and that is an interesting one, which has been scratching my head a bit. This is your electricity, it's your water, it's your gas.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been anything huge to suggest that there would be a kind of a big loss of jobs, and yet we have seen jobs coming down. So it might be so some kind of natural kind of a loss of jobs, or allowing the labor force to get smaller in some of these sectors, given that they probably are a little bit kind of heavy on employment.
Siobhan, of course, these numbers have come out 2 weeks before the national election. Does this add to the woes of the ruling party? I don't know how desensitized, well, actually I don't think people have been desensitized to the challenge of unemployment as much as it has remained at these levels. These are people's lives. And I'm just wondering, does this add to the possibility of a coalition government, and maybe something that economists are watching at this point?
Well, what I will say is that I think employment, or a lack thereof, is definitely where economic policy comes home to roost, for individuals. So I think you are correct in saying, as much as we know that we have a very high level of unemployment, it is still stark to see the numbers. There are still people out there who are of voting age, who will be going, is it worth me going to the polls? And that's we aren't even talking about who are we going to vote for. Are they even going to pitch? And so you have a bunch of people who are probably feeling quite downbeaten, and have quite low sentiment. And so I think there are concerns, and I think it's is something that is going to be reflected in the polls. But as to what it means at the end, I honestly can't tell you. And I am going to use the out that I am not a political commentator as my way out. But it is definitely something I think that will weigh on people's decisions either to vote or not, and where they do decide to put their tick if they do go.
Indeed. 2 weeks. We will know around that time. Thank you so much for your time, Siobhan. That was RMB Economist Siobhan Redford.